Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt
And
Roast.
I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
Here we are with our reaction to HBO's The Mortician. This is a show, a three-part documentary that just wrapped up over the weekend. I'll say from the get-go, I'm not typically a huge documentary viewer, which is kind of funny in a way because I feel like after almost every documentary I watch, I'm like, that was really good. I think I'm gonna watch more of these things now, and then I barely ever do.
Yeah, I mean, we got recommended this a lot
Hmm.
from you guys. If you've been here for a while, you know that I'm a licensed funeral director. I've had my license for over 10 years now. I'm not practicing right now. I'm here on YouTube with you guys instead.
Yeah.
But you guys have been recommending for us to watch it, to review it, to react to it. So here we are. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be talking about some of what we saw in this. I mean, this is really shocking stuff. I'm going to
Yeah.
share with you some inside funeral stories that I know of to kind of compare to what we just saw here because I've seen some stuff, but I've never seen or heard of anything like this. The funeral industry is pretty regulated now. I mean, yeah, this was back in the 80s. Everything was a little more the Wild West in the 80s, but the things that are happening now compared to what was happening then, most of it is just human error at this point.
Yeah, I'm not from the world of funeral service. I don't have that experience. All I kind of knew going into watching this was things that I'd heard from you in the past, and then just also basic, questions of human decency that are just sort of what's wrong with these people? Why are they doing this? But I feel like I learned a lot from watching it, but at the same time, I was very terrified while watching it. The ending in episode 3 is especially chilling. That's really the best way that I can put it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the funeral industry, so it's going to attract some weird people, but in general, it is few and far between with the people that actually make it through the program that would be like a David Sconce or something like that. Obviously, he was in the funeral industry through generations, but I'm a funeral director from Canada, and the program there at Humber College is meant to weed out people that would be, bad actors getting into this industry and doing bad things. The anatomy program alone was really there to wash people out.
Yeah, and I think hearing about all that was very educational for somebody like me because I grew up very small town in Texas, and you know what, if you're in a very small town, you know what reigns supreme a lot of the time? Stereotypes. So a lot of
Oh,
us
yes.
kind of thought that basically all funeral directors were Wednesday Addams or some like
Yep.
variation of that. And even the couple that I ran across over the course of my life, like where my grandmother passed away, it was like not really that much was done to kind of shake me of that. But I think, knowing you obviously have, hearing your stories, and I'm not exactly gonna say this documentary really helps with the portrayal of some of them, but they also bring in, real people from the funeral industry that are kind of like, okay, this is not normal. Do not judge us based on what is apparently going on here.
Yeah, I mean, The Mortician, the show here is really focusing on one aspect, which is more of the cremation, embalming, stuff that does give people who are not in the funeral industry, pause to be like, oh, it's attracting, very strange people because how could you be doing some of this sort of thing? The preparation of the body, which is really only like 10% of the job. Like this job really is in the service industry, it is creating an event for funerals. You're getting flowers, you're booking the venue, you're getting the cars, you're getting the food, you've got church if that's, part of what you want, bringing in the minister. Like it is really an event that you're planning. It's a lot of paperwork, but because of this one part of the industry, it is the part that everybody really wants to peek behind the curtain and be like,
Mhm.
what's it really like? What's going on there? And I will say, of course, that it is very different from Canada and the US of what the different practices are and what's going on. But the woman in this documentary was like, things are very regulated now. They are.
Yeah. And we have a lot more to say about The Mortician, some stories from Jess, some just various insights about this very dark and intense documentary. Before we go forward into that, though, be sure to hit that subscribe button because, yeah, we are diving headfirst into The Mortician here, but we have a lot of scripted content coming. We are
Mhm.
going to be discussing, it seems pretty macabre to mention this, but Dexter
Right?
Resurrection is coming up next month, and we're very, very excited to do that. We have reviews, previews, theories, all sorts of great coverage coming of that show very, very soon.
So definitely hit that subscribe button. And if you want to support us further, you can head over to our Patreon. Over there, we're covering Murderbot and Criminal Minds Evolution. And it's a great way to help support us and get these weekly reviews. And it's the only place that you're able to get them. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. We very, very much appreciate that.
Okay, before we dive too far into the muck of things, I want to ask you guys and you,
All right, all right.
how would you want to die? If you had a choice, how would you want to go out?
Okay, I have two answers, so I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna cheat a little
Okay, you
bit.
cheat a little bit.
Okay.
I have two answers as well.
All right. So the first answer, and this is the most obvious one to everyone who knows me, is I want to die after I meet the aliens because what's gonna happen here is just that even if they kill me, I will have at least met the aliens, and I can die saying that I had first contact before they vaporized me or did whatever else they wanted to do. Okay, that's the silly answer.
Also on my list.
Okay, the serious answer is it's not something so specific as it's just peacefully. I've talked about this like in my sleep. In the past, I've mentioned that I really love the whole Buddhist idea of when you die, you go back into the ocean, and this is something
Mhm,
that they talked a little bit about on the White Lotus this past season. I first
mhm,
kind of got this from The Good Place, and I tend to really think a lot about the idea of there's so much suffering in life, like there's so much hardship that we all go through that it should be a peaceful endeavor. It should be this idea of finally getting to release suffering and kind of getting to be a part of this larger ecosystem that is life, the universe and everything. And I don't want to sound like I'm going too far into like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy now, but that's sort of what I kind of tend to think about.
I want to go out in an intense revenge plot, John Wick style in a club.
Oh,
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 I'm
right.
kidding. I would never be caught dead in a club.
Oh,
I want to go peacefully in my sleep. Seems like a romantic way to go. Doesn't traumatize my family, my son. Like I don't want to traumatize anyone.
yeah, I don't know. I'm not too much of a serious person when it comes to chaos. I don't need chaos. I just need a little bit of peace. Maybe an alien can help me. I don't know. The aliens don't have to be our enemies, right?
Okay, so it sounds like aliens are on your bucket list. This is the last thing before we get more into the show. Bucket list stuff. What are some things on your guys' bucket list that you want to do before you go? I want to go to Japan and have a coffee in the Capybara Cafe. I love capybaras. I want to learn how to cook roti that's gluten free, that doesn't taste like sand. And I want to sink a boat.
You want to sink a boat?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yes,
Well,
I would like
wouldn't
to
it
sink a boat.
wouldn't it be better if the boat doesn't sink and then you don't have to swim to safety?
Well, didn't say I want to be in it. I just
Oh,
want
okay,
to watch
okay,
it
all
sink.
right,
Yeah,
all right. Now,
I want to watch a boat sink.
okay, all right. So I kind of once again, I got like very specific, but then very broad things. I've thought about this a lot, where I just want to have a day where I don't have to do anything, and I can just wake up and hear the sound of the ocean and just sit by the water. Maybe I have some coconut pancakes or something like that, and a nice latte, and then I just enjoy the whole day by the water. Maybe I read something, maybe I go walk over somewhere, get a burrito, and it's just really relaxing, and I don't have to think a lot about anything else. Like in a broad sense, of course, I would love to travel. Like creatively, there's some things I would love to pursue, but it's
Mhm.
just like my bucket list. I kind of tend to find with bucket lists that if you make them too like I've got 50 things I want to do before I die or something, then it gets overwhelming. Then it starts to feel a little bit like pressure. It's sort of like when I play Skyrim and I've got 50 quests in my quest log, I start to freak out because then I'm just like, this is too many quests. I don't know what to do with my life.
Okay, let's talk about David Sconce because what he did was wildly shocking, unimaginable. Every single thing that was happening in each episode was like a bomb that just kept exploding. I was
Yeah.
just like, from the alleged like grave robbing, cutting off fingers to steal jewelry, the multiple bodies in the retort. And it's called a retort. Stop calling it an oven. Everybody on there that keeps calling it an oven, it was just making me cringe. It's not called that. It's so like just disrespectful. And I understand that they are obviously disrespectful, but it's still like, oh my goodness. They're breaking the bones of the bodies to fit multiple people in the retort. They're harvesting organs. They're reselling tissue. The mom's cooking the books. Like, there's allegedly all these murders. I have never heard of anything like this in my life. It was so shocking.
Yeah, I was just appalled with the nature of what was going on here with the bodies themselves. I did not know we were going to be going into organ harvesting, or like you said, cooking the books, or other allegations later on. I just thought once we get to that point, I was like, okay, that's kind of it. That's what this show is going to be about. That seems like enough to get somebody locked in prison for the rest of their lives, and we will certainly get more into that as this video goes along. But just like the escalation that you see, I mean, this is probably why I honestly don't watch a lot of documentaries. Is as good as they are, they just make me incredibly uncomfortable, and I just felt more and more uncomfortable as this went on.
This made me really uncomfortable because as being I have never heard or seen of anything like this. Cremation's very well regulated in Canada. For a long time, you couldn't even have a funeral home and a crematorium. They couldn't be owned or on the same property as each other. They had to be separated for this kind of reason, not the putting in multiple bodies, but more so that you didn't have a funeral director that was like, I'm going to kill this person. And as a funeral director, I get to write the death certificate. And then I can just go downstairs and put them in the retort. They've disappeared. Like, that was the big reason to regulate this, so that people couldn't be doing stuff like this.
It's weird because I would have never obviously thought of any of this myself, but after hearing you talk about it and after seeing what happens in The Mortician, it just feels like this should still be a law everywhere, that these things can't be on the same property, because
It's not anymore, not in Canada. It got changed like probably like I want to say 9 or 8 years ago, when corporations came in and they were like, hey, we want to be able to hold funerals and have celebrations. We have this huge event room, but we also happen to have retorts on the same property, and we want to be able to have all the money.
Well, too
It was
bad.
a big fight.
Yeah, I think they should lose that fight, because
They didn't.
this is just too much a recipe for disaster. Like, so much of this show is about you trusting, funeral home or certain people with your loved ones. So it's just the
Yes.
idea that then you're basically allowing one person or two people to make this huge determination on every single step and how they're able to go about this process, and not, take jewelry, or not put multiple bodies in the retort, or do all these different. It's just a lot of trust you're putting on one person. And I do think that the part of this documentary that they really nail is this idea that, okay, the Lamb Funeral Home's been in Pasadena for a very, very long time. And so I think the reason why they were probably able to either get away with this or attach the clientele they were for so long was like there was all this ingrained trust in these people, because they were so involved in the community, that it's like, okay, maybe that's why you're able to get away with this, because people trust you that you're gonna take care of your loved one. But after watching this, I would never trust a funeral home that had a crematorium built in, that they could just do everything.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, in this documentary, it seemingly took another funeral director to figure out what was going on, where he was just kind of like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, there's a remarkable amount of bodies that are being cremated throughout, a certain amount of time. When it does, they're correct. It takes about 2.5 hours to be able to cremate one person. So how are they doing these kinds of numbers? And it kind of reminds me of this I'll call it unnamed funeral home in Toronto that lost their license, not for this, but for something else, which was the most shocking thing I'd heard at that time, which is that they were sort of skimping on the embalming fluids that they were using allegedly with the bodies. So they got caught kind of in the same way here, where it was the actual dealers of the embalming fluids, the company was like, these numbers don't add up. Like, you guys are ordering this amount of chemical, but you're claiming this amount of bodies. That's not possible. Like, unless you're getting it from somewhere else and they weren't, that it was like, this just doesn't make any sense. And that's how they got caught. The numbers don't lie.
I think what makes something like this go on for as long as it did, because it was obviously, shocking. You're watching these episodes and you see the amount of people cremated in a year's time just like escalates exponentially, and it gets to
Wild.
these numbers that are just absolutely crazy. And yeah, you're sort of sitting back and thinking, okay, why did it take a rival funeral director, funeral home owner to start to point this out? And I think a lot of it just kind of comes down to sort of similar to the story you just told, where unless you're in the industry, you're not going to know a lot of this. And even
No.
if you aren't in the industry and like you have even a natural curiosity, it's hard to get people to talk about it because in
Yes.
general, the average person doesn't want to think about how cremations are done, how a funeral home operates, because we live in this world where there's such a unmistakable stigma around death where we just don't want to hear about it, don't want to talk about it. And so something like this can go on for years at a time because somebody who's bringing a loved one to have them cremated, they're not going to question anything. They're just going to come in, they're going to bring their loved one back, and then they're just going to accept that, because I think anything other than that is just too difficult.
Yeah, it's good that we're kind of in a space now. I mean, it's still a subject that people are not willing to openly want to discuss. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a hard subject, right? But there are more morticians and funeral directors that are coming out and discussing this more. I mean, my ex-boss was the best boss I've ever had. He's so great. Brad over at Ridley Funeral Home, he has a podcast that's been going on for a few years now where he's openly talking about, the process, what it's like, the grieving, going through all the emotions of it. It's great and it's really educational. It's helpful for people that might want to learn a little bit more. I've just discovered Grave Conversations with David Sconce, who is being like doing this through Titan Caskets, it seems, where he's actually talking to other people and other celebrities about this, about death and what they feel about it, and having those uncomfortable conversations that should be had.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of, okay, talking about death that's too uncomfortable or it's too difficult, where it's the one thing that actually kind of binds us all as people, where, everybody dies, and not to get too direct or macabre about that either. It's just, it's something we all collectively go through. So this idea of having open conversations about it, I think that's okay. And I think it's okay to even, do something kind of what David is doing with everybody having
Mm,
conversations
yeah.
in caskets, just because it opens conversation, but in a way that's a little bit more accessible.
Yes.
Because if you are too ignorant about how the process works, then you do end up in a situation where people can take advantage of you or do things that are just like wildly disrespectful and awful, and you wouldn't know about it because you've just shielded yourself from the truth.
Yeah, like for me, watching this documentary, and as shocking as it was and the things that they were doing, I've told you the story that's the biggest shocking thing, which was they were using less embalming fluid
Yeah.
on the bodies. Not okay in any which way, but it's not this. Like some of the things that he was doing, cutting off the fingers to take jewelry, like jewelry's pretty well monitored throughout at least the funeral homes that I worked at, that when you come in, whatever you're with, your personal possessions, they're photographed, not the bodies, but it's like, oh, there's a ring, there's earrings, there's whatever, so that when it's time to give those things back to the family can make a decision. Oh, I'd like them to stay with grandma. Oh, I'd like them back, whatever it is, right? Like it makes it so that those things don't go missing, right? Like this can't happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
it can happen, but it doesn't happen as often. I've heard of jewelry theft, but I've never actually seen it.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was actually going to ask you about because I was kind of confused watching this why these people still had jewelry or things like that on them when they were going to the retort because it kind of felt like wouldn't the family have a conversation about, oh, I want this back in advance?
Well, that's where it gets complicated, right? Like for how it worked in Canada, whoever's actually signing the contract is the person that's responsible for the body as well as the possession. So typically, they're the people that make the decision. Oh, I'd like grandma's ring back. I'd like grandma's ring to stay. And then the sister comes in and is like, no, I want the ring. Did you sign the contract? No. Then you don't actually have the right to take that ring. It's the person who's got the signature on the contract. They're the people that you're legally dealing with.
I think a lot of this documentary to me now that I've seen all three parts, like now that I'm looking back at it in retrospect, like the thing that obviously stands out is ultimately how little amount of prison time was ultimately served
Shocking!
for some of the things that are going
Shocking.
on here. Because even just the idea of how much certain parts of this operation are thought through, because eventually, after the original crematorium burns, they then shift this out to further away from the funeral home. And at the point where we get into this documentary where there's this investigation, everybody's actually finding out the truth about this other new place, I was just sitting back and being, okay, that's a wrap. Like, how do you not go to prison for the rest of your life for doing something like this when you were caught directly in the act doing it?
Those pictures were horrifying. Horrifying.
Yeah.
They had, what was it, like 99 witnesses on a stand or something like that. He said it was like one of the longest pre-trials. It was like 6 months because they had so much testimony. I couldn't believe how little jail time there was for what they did to like 20,000 people. Like, this is not a small amount of
No.
people. This is a large amount of people. And where's the respect after you have died? You're still a person. And I know David Sconce is on here being like, you're not a person anymore. You're not a person anymore. That is not true.
No.
You are still a person, whether you believe that the soul leaves the body, whatever. That body is still that person. Like, to
Yeah.
me, you can't do stuff like that.
Yeah, the thing that I took away from it really was just that almost like all of us, clearly the police and lawmakers are also really uncomfortable talking about death because they did not really have checks and balances in place for if something like this happened.
Yeah, it feels a lot like what you said earlier. This family has been around for generations, that they have been serving that community for decades, has been handed down, handed down, handed down. It seems like some of this has also been going on for generations. So, with nobody knowing that, people are just like, oh, well, this is where I go. Somebody dies in the family, you go lay in funeral home. They
Yeah.
take care of you. They've been doing it for decades, sort of thing. And I wonder if that's what ended up happening, because it seems like, we heard from that one juror. They were just like, yeah, we all were shocked by how little time was given. And it seems like maybe the judge was in that spot, that they were just like, you know what? They've been part of the community a long time. Yeah, this isn't great, but we're not going to take away their whole life for it. Where I was just like, take away their next, 20 lives for it.
The part of this documentary, if there's something I'm going to criticize it for, it's that I feel like they could have gone a lot deeper into how long was this really going on before David Sconce, if it was going on, because you mentioned it, like it was addressed that, okay, there are parts of this that may have been going on a long time, and they kind of
That
just,
the parents knew, and it felt like the
yeah,
parents knew the minute that it was like his ex-wife was like, oh yeah, we're getting married, and you've got the father being like, you sure you want to do
yeah.
this, and the mother, oh, you sure you want to do this? I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is because the mother didn't want to talk to them or it was because they couldn't get any, strong information to sort of validate certain claims or whatever, but it just felt like that part of it was just sort of brushed over. And obviously, someone like David could have just been an isolated bad actor, but there is also this part of it. It's like, okay, well, he might have learned a lot of this from somewhere and then just taken
Maybe.
it to some extreme. Like, we know, thanks to the data, that the show gave us, that it's not like all of this and the numbers that it was happening was going on before he started doing it, but he still may have acquired that information from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe some of the other stuff, like the stealing of the teeth and jewelry and tissue donation, was all happening before. Seems like they changed the contract so that families didn't see that they were also agreeing to this. I mean, the forgery that was going on, I've heard little bits of that, whispers in the industry, but I haven't actually seen any of that.
Yeah, it's just the sheer volume of things that are going on here that is the most shocking part of it. But then you're attaching all of that to, I think, the moment that most people are going to be talking about, just the final couple minutes of this documentary and the suggestion that's raised by David in that interview, which I had a couple of interesting questions about this too from a technical perspective. So, they had to basically they had to change out something production wise. And so this gives a little bit of a pause, and yet the cameras are still rolling. I'm just curious about the strategy here where it was like, okay, we know we need to change something out, but in the process of that, we're still kind of rolling a little bit just in case there's something that's said here in this quote unquote casual environment.
Yeah, here's the thing is like this is probably multi-camera, so they probably have a couple cameras that are set up and they're doing it from the different angles. Shoot it once because he's not gonna this isn't an actor, so they're not gonna get him to say things over and over again. So they probably have like three different cameras set up. Camera over here on the right needs to have its film changed out, and that's probably what happened. So they're like, okay, well, if he's still talking, we'll just continue rolling these other two cameras and like hope for the best as we're changing it out, that we have some sort of ending. And it's been an interesting reaction online to this ending because there's some people that are like, oh wow, he's admitted to other crimes, and then other people that are like, well, kind of like he's kind of said something, but kind of not really.
Okay, so I read a little bit an interview the director gave to the Hollywood Reporter about this, where he sort of described further his decisions because he had this opportunity to have this conversation with David off camera, and he declined. And he basically elaborated further. It's like, I don't want to carry something like that with me. And if he tells me something off camera, then it's like, what do I really do with that? Like, what can I do with that? It's just basically my word then against allegedly his. Like, he said that he's willing, if law enforcement opens up this case again, if there's anything more that can be put out there, then maybe this documentary can be helpful with that. I mean, all of this reminds me very much of the ending of the Jinx, and I think if you watch the Jinx, you kind of know a little bit of what I'm talking about. I just felt very just like, I can't believe, I know nothing is definitive after watching it, but I can't believe they even got what they did.
Yeah, I mean, it's really shocking. I mean, he does seem like somebody who wants to tell whatever it is that he allegedly did. He
Mhm.
wants somebody to know about it. Like from the documentary, it seems like while he was doing this stuff that, oh, how many bodies can we pack into a retort? Let's make it a game. Let's, you against me. Let's figure it out. Let's have a leaderboard type thing. That it was all very much, it just didn't matter to him. And there was a lot of bragging about it. So it wasn't that surprising, but at the end he was just kind of like, maybe there's more, maybe there's, I was just like, oh my god, like, guy, like, you have gotten away with so much, you've done so little time with this. And I think that that might be the thing that's motivating him at this point. He's kind of like, I can say or do anything, and I'm barely getting, a slap on the wrist for the things I'm doing. Just a couple of years in prison here, a couple of years in prison here. It's a nothing of the things that he's done. And I know he doesn't have remorse, and he's kind of like, I don't feel anything any which way about it. But if he did these other things that he hasn't really gotten any time for, he knows he's gotten away with it so many times
Yeah.
that there's nothing that's gonna get him. And that's what I walked away from with this whole documentary, which is just feeling kind of depressed about it, that there's no real justice for anything. He's out there just living his life, everything that's going on. It reminds me a lot of back in Canada, the Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka case, where Carla Homolka just got the deal of the century, just out there living her life. Like,
I
oh my God.
I hope that this being out there will allow someone to dig a little bit deeper and maybe find something that the prosecution wasn't able to find before. Because I think this is one of the big purposes of something like this. I know there's often a lot of criticism for this particular genre where they're like, okay, why are you putting something out there into the world that's this depressing? But at the same time, you need people to be aware, obviously, that something like this happened. I had never heard of David Sconce before. I
Nope.
watched this. I mean, I was born in 86, so I mean, a lot of it was a little bit before my time, but you need people to be aware of this so that one, you prevent something like this from happening again. But two, I think it's just also effective because you never know what somebody else out there may know or may be able
Yeah.
to find.
It was really interesting as well to see at the end where, we have this funeral director being like, things are much more legislated now. She's correct. They
Yeah.
absolutely are. But then they're like flashing all these newspaper things. And the last one was something like, families' cremated remains are missing. Like they got misplaced, which is a human error, which is not great.
Yeah.
And it does happen. But it is not what happened with David Sconce. It's not even close. This is not even the same sport. Like, it is completely different. And I've heard of human error. Like, I know another funeral director that was telling me about a funeral director at their funeral home that accidentally marked the body with the wrong name, that they didn't check the hospital band to the toe tag, and they thought that it was another person, put the name on the outside of the bag, went to the crematorium, got caught before anything happened, and they were able to, bring the right body over. And that's more of what I've heard in the industry. Like, the most sort of debauchery of the industry is just that funeral directors in Canada, anyways, and from what I've seen in my experience, not everybody, but they're very much like drinking and partying and cheating and hooking up. But like, this type of stuff is not really a thing.
So basically, they're like Grey's Anatomy and
They
whatever.
absolutely are like Grey's Anatomy. Like, it was weird too, because a lot of them were watching Grey's Anatomy at that time. That was just like, wow, everybody's like leaving their wives and cheating with this person and drinking and partying of all ages. And I was like, this is really wild. Like, why is it like this?
The thing I'm most worried about coming out of all this is that everyone now is going to assume that whenever there is human error that happens out there, because that obviously happens in funeral service, that happens in every
Everything,
job.
everything.
Yeah, that they're going to automatically think now because they watch this that, okay, there's another David Sconce in the making, where it's just like, okay, we don't need to jump to those sort of conclusions. I think if you're coming out of this feeling that way, that's the wrong takeaway from this documentary. It's that this one person and some other people who worked for him did some truly despicable things, and we should be aware of certain elements of any industry that we're associating ourselves with so that we can be attentive
Yeah.
without being paranoid.
Yeah, I feel like the end of this documentary that they didn't, it almost felt like they didn't have enough to give like that punch at the end.
Yeah.
Like, they had David kind of sort of maybe admit to maybe something, nothing. Like, it was so like, it was just not enough. And that, I think, them trying to have this funeral director be like, it's much more legislative now, and then to show all these headlines to be like, oh, not really. I'm just like, no, that's not really true. Like, there are things that of course are happening, but it's not at this David Sconce level. Like, if
Yeah.
you are concerned that you are going to have your loved one cremated, in Canada at least, you can go and be a witness to see your own person go into the retort. You can actually be there for that. You can pay for that service to be there when they're going in.
Yeah, I think it's just this whole documentary is a message to just educate yourself with what you want for your loved ones, what you want for yourself, and just try to make sure you're really prepared so that nobody, and not just in funeral homes, but that nobody in any industry can take advantage of you at a time in which
Right.
you know you're going to be grieving. And when you're grieving, you don't think clearly. I think all of us who have gone through something know that already.
Yeah.
But that is our general takeaway of The Mortician on HBO. So let us know in the comments what you thought about watching this, what your takeaways were from all of it. Thank you so much for watching and sharing your thoughts. We appreciate that. Hit that subscribe button and support us further by joining our Patreon.
Mhm.
We have a link in the description below. We are covering there exclusively Criminal Minds Evolution and Murderbot.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. We'll see you here next time.